Hello and welcome to ET Brand Equity presents The Big Leap, powered by CleverTap, an exclusive chat show featuring pioneers from India's 12 largest and fastest growing brands. I'm your host Gautam Srinivasan, and during these conversations, we'll bring you an inside look into the growth stories and success mantras of businesses that have taken a big leap and understand the nuts and bolts of how they identified gaps in the market and created solutions which transformed consumer behavior. Well, fashion and style is one of the biggest product categories in India that engages millions of people on a daily basis. So today we have with us a leading fashion and lifestyle brand that was launched in 2016 and since then has been growing consistently throughout the years. Ajio, a Reliance retail digital initiative, has emerged as the ultimate fashion destination for styles that are handpicked, on trend and at prices that are best suited for all consumers. It works with a simple philosophy that inclusivity and acceptance are the only way to make our society a little more humane. With a huge, loyal community, Ajio boasts of its own labels as well as exclusive international brands. So would you like to know how Ajio made it big and how they are thriving in this market? Then log into this wide-ranging conversation with Vineet Nair, CEO at Ajio, and Puneet Bhatia, VP for Marketing at Ajio. Puneet, thank you so much for giving us the time for this conversation. Looking forward to understanding the retention secrets behind the success of Ajio. But first of all, thank you so much for being part of this conversation.
Thank you for having us.
All right, Puneet, let's start with you as an icebreaker. Your definition of fashion as an individual and as a business leader, what would you say?
For me, fashion can actually be defined as an extension of style. Most of us have an innate sense of style. Style, when it meets the right kind of fashion, because fashion is not something that's static. It's something that evolves. It evolves with your own sense of style. So when you are able to get your style and fashion together, you don't need to say who you are. It says who you are all about. For me, that is style. As a business leader, and as an individual, I would extend the business leader and an individual perspective to one more level, where I often say that I am lucky to be operating with a team of folks who've created Ajio, as you mentioned. It's a young team, it's a relaxed team. So my sense of style and sense of fashion is also very relaxed. A denim is my regular attire as far as what I wear as jeans, and maybe a t-shirt or a shirt that makes it, that adds to the atmosphere of the organization that I'm with, and I enjoy in that.
You can see that all across. It's an influence, right? It's an influence in an individual manner, whether you are a business leader or not. Fashion is all around us. Yeah. All right, we'll expand more on that and understand how that philosophy works towards making Ajio a success. But before that, let me come to you, Puneet. Your idea of, what do you think is your customer? Who comes to mind when you think of your customer?
Wow. I would just add to what Vineet said. So our customer is actually in front of us. So they are my colleagues, first of all. So they are the common public who actually buy everything, most of the things nowadays online. They are the avid users of mobile phone or laptops or any digital platforms, right? So that's what my first audience which comes to my mind. Okay, if I'm going out and figuring out a new acquisition or something, these kind of people or personas I should really target. So, of course, they are the ones who are giving me a good boost.
Well, fashion is all around us. Customers are all around us. But there are many personas of customers. So it will be interesting to see how exactly you decoded that and found out the right kind of customer. Before that, every great story has a great origin story. So let's come to the origin with you, Vineet. Ajio started off with that inventory-led business model, then added B2C and online to offline capabilities. So during this evolution, what sort of leaps were you taking in terms of generating buzz and motivating users to use your platforms? Take us through some of the earliest conversations that you were having with customers and how that shaped your thinking.
I'll take one step behind launch, before launch. I think it's imperative that every one of us who aspires to create a business needs to be fairly clear about what one needs to do. It is the ability to put together a business where there is a need gap. The ability to fill a consumer need gap is the essence of creating any business, where you are able to create some value. Now, going back to the time as to before we got into the online space, I remember Reliance Retail was a rather late entrant in this business. You had many other players who came into India very early on. So I think around 2007 is when some of the brands were launched. We got into this business, like you said, in 2016. 2016 is when we did the beta launch for Ajio. We were fairly clear that Ajio, as an online fashion platform, needs to be able to fill a few need gaps that we identified. We beta tested our platform and we were ready for launch comprehensively in 2017. But we did not, in fact, define any definitive model. We looked at multiple need gaps in the market and so-called, and should I say, pivoted our organization to meet those need gaps.
Was that a conscious decision? Wait and watch, see what are the gaps, see how you're filling those gaps, and then you define yourself as an organization?
Yeah, it was conscious to the extent that we were very, very clear that we are not going to be getting into the online business for the sake of getting into the online business. As Reliance, we were clear that if we get into a business, we got to be the market leaders, because we do believe that we have an organizational strength and capability of building winning business models. Winning not just for the organization, but for the consumer whom we expect to fulfill certain need gaps. When we looked at the online space, and the biggest advantage that we had as an organization is we are clearly India's single largest retailer of fashion. We understand this country. We understand that this is not a homogeneous country like many other countries. This is a country that has got multiple sets of consumer cohorts. And the digital platforms give us the ability to talk to each of these platforms or these cohorts at a level that each of them expects. So fashion for you could be very different from fashion for me. And the way it is served to you, your expectations could be very different from an expectation from another place. So India is a mosaic of consumer cohorts. It is this amazing world where you can never really say that this is right or this is not right, and that is the beauty of fashion. So when you have fashion and digital coming together, which gives you the ability to give you loads of data, loads of information, and your ability to be able to meet those needs at distinct levels, is when you are able to get into and serve those needs. So when we got in, we may have begun as an inventory-led model. We were very clear that at a certain stage, we would be talking to sets of consumers. We would be studying what they came back with, what kind of information we gathered from them, and how we could potentially use that information to increase our base of consumers and serve a wider reaching consumer. So from inventory, we moved to very quickly to a marketplace model. But then COVID came along, and trust me, nobody planned for it. Like they say, the best plans go out of the window when something like a pandemic hits you. We, instead of looking at it as a problem, we suddenly realized, not suddenly, I think it was something that all of us had to realize.
It feels like it's sudden, but the
Sure.
timing becomes imperative. And I get what you're saying here. We'll come to that aspect, but I want to, before we fast forward to that phase, you mentioned during the beta phase you had identified need gaps. I want you to expand on that during the beta phase and post-launch, the need gaps that you were trying to address, whether it's from a UX perspective, CX perspective, logistics. There's a whole lot of factors which need to be resolved to drive more engagement. Could you shed more light on that and how it again changed the way you did business?
Yep. From an online perspective again, we have sets of stores across the country. We cover 5,000 towns from an offline perspective. So when we looked at that data points and we were putting together our online model, we realized that our sets of stores can reach a certain set of audience, but from an online world, I could slice and dissect multiple sets of consumer cohorts, figure out their requirements. Take our simple country in terms of festivals. We have so many festivals. I could potentially take one single state, create a certain kind of festive look for that one state and target just that one state, even from the perspective of a geo-targeting exercise. So the rest of the country wouldn't necessarily see what I'm doing in Kerala alone, but I could do a Kerala range and put that together for Kerala, or a Kashmir range and do that for Kashmir. That gave us the ability to understand that you have potentially filled a gap that a consumer who from in that state couldn't potentially get from the rest of the sites that are available. We were looking at online from the perspective of being able to meet multiple needs in a very, very complex and cohort-driven exercise. That was our whole exercise. From that drove many other points of data. For example, if you look at one critical point was consumers were often concerned about them receiving fakes or not getting the original stuff. But when we were fulfilling merchandise from the stores or the company-owned stores because of our online to offline model, we could fill that concern that consumers had.
What impact did that have on the data point of retention? Because you're fulfilling their needs, you're addressing that gap. How did it impact retention for you?
It fulfilled many gaps, and retention, there's no one single silver bullet. There are multiple aspects that impact retention. But this was one of the aspects, and as you may be aware, our retention scores are possibly the highest in the industry. We've taken sets of actions over a period of time that gave consumers the levels of trust in the business. So a month back, for example, we are now about 5 years down in our business. We are growing at a very, very rapid pace. But what we also keep a very close eye on is our retention scores, whether it's 15 days, 30 days, 45 days, and also who are our customers who come back after a year. So we address it in terms of speed, in terms of quality, in terms of genuineness of product, and various other aspects which are the single or the key factors that define consumer satisfaction at that level.
All right.
So that has helped us considerably.
We'll expand on that. I'm sure that should be bringing a smile to your face, Puneet, hearing that Ajio betters industry benchmarks. But before I come to that, let's look at the impact on business as well, because Ajio's overall business KPIs, whether it's revenue, order, traffic per session, and active customer base, all have grown by 10x since the onset of the pandemic. So from your perspective, take us through how marketing campaigns have achieved these numbers and put a smile on both of your faces.
See, marketing campaigns before pandemic, during pandemic, and after pandemic were actually absolutely different. Communication was different because consumers' needs was different, right? Our audience behavior was different. So before pandemic, they were there on the digital devices, but they may not be really keen to buy online, right? During pandemic, of course, they had no other choice, but yes, to just browse. But then with browsing, they've got a trust, a name with Ajio, that of course they can trust the brand, they can trust the products, and they can try out. So the moment they started trying out, we also found this as an opportunity where why we are looking at only acquisition in this space. Let's try to understand in-depth retention cohorts and understand their behavior, their communication, how they really want to react on a particular kind of communication. So if I send them a kind of message that, hey, this product is available to Ajio, with Ajio, you can shop it now, get it delivered tomorrow. Versus if I would say, this is another brand available with us. That's the only communication difference. So these two kind of communications play a different role on different cohorts. So that's what we analyzed and tried segmenting further, that what sort of cohort should get what sort of communication. So basis on that, we started improvising things on web, on our app. And since our app is a major contributor to business, it's easy to communicate to customers as well. So we are sending emails using SMS as a channel, email, app notification push. Of course, they play a major role in all this. And as Vineet mentioned, cohort segments, of course, communication was different. But then all these learnings came to us when we started, iterating that and developing a technology behind it. Okay, so we started developing our pages. So Vineet would talk more about that. We started developing custom pages for consumers. So now most of the consumer cohort, different sets, would see different kind of Ajio website.
True
Every consumer would,
true hyper personalization
Absolutely.
in a sense.
Absolutely.
And I can see that in your numbers, right? Because as we spoke about bettering industry benchmarks, whether it's average open rates for mails among users or average click-through rates with high average loyalty numbers in terms of stickiness for daily or monthly average users, you top all those matrices. The biggest insight, anything that you'd like to share, and also, how does, say, the partnership with CleverTap enable you to stay ahead of the retention curve? Because we really want to get into the nuts and bolts of how these various initiatives are helping you hyper personalize at scale and making sure that your brand is front and center in terms of your consumers' mind space.
So I think CleverTap is definitely an interesting and a known name in our company. So we have actually grown together, if I would say. We consider CleverTap as a close technology partner, right? So now coming to the points, what all channels we are using via CleverTap and everything, CleverTap has given us various level of intelligence and an opportunity to reach consumer via different channels at the same time, creating journeys. So we can use email, SMS, notifications, everything together for one consumer. If you have received my email, but you have not read that in 4 hours, I'm sending you a message. If you have ignored my message, I'm reaching out through a different medium. So all these journeys were, pretty much possible through this. So why I'm saying it's a technology partner, we have grown together is there were various things which we also learned over the period. And we, of course, wanted various quick technology changes, adoptions, which we got from the team quickly. And that has helped us testing things much faster, experiment a lot, and getting much better results and much faster growth.
And that partnership itself is hyper personal. As you mentioned, it's not one size fits all. It depends on different contexts.
Absolutely.
And the partnership can grow. And that's unique in the sense that where we were 10, 15 years ago, how the landscape itself has changed. All right, let's look at some of the big issues. Shopping cart abandonment. Whenever I have these discussions, that's one of the points which come up. So what was Ajio's strategy here to kind of mitigate this and other challenges, whether it comes to, say, increasing complexity of user segmentation, shopper context getting more and more unique, and you really need to put thought behind it? How do you address various challenges like this?
So I think I would take Vineet's statement again from the initial dialogue that we are trying to make things simpler. We don't believe in complexity. Of course, data, the way you want to use it, it's up to you. Whether you want to make complex algos and try to achieve a result, or you try to think simple and achieve that result, right? So we follow the second path, and making things simpler is much easier for us and much scalable. Now coming to the point of shopping cart abandons, right? Shopping cart abandons, we don't consider shopping cart abandons silo, of course. It is a behavior. So if a consumer, nowadays, consumer has device, they're spending most of their time on their browsing through YouTube or anything, and shopping sites or app like Ajio. Now what they are doing is, they have certain choice. If I want to buy something, not now, maybe later, I would not wish list it. I would add to cart. So then I would keep filling my cart, but I don't want to buy now, right? So we took some time to understand this whole behavior and played really well over there, I would say. Now we have gone one step before shopping cart. Now, before you add anything into the shopping cart, your product browsing behavior is different. What are you doing over there? What are you leaving behind on the product browsing level? And then what are you adding in the cart, right? Those two are different journeys. We broke them together, broke them separately, and then we tried getting much better results when we reached out to people who were from their browsing behavior instead of shopping cart, because shopping cart is my wish list. Now, that doesn't mean shopping cart abandons doesn't work for us. We have gone to a different zone, like I would say events. So if we are in a sale event, shopping cart abandon plays a major role because there people have already decided what they want to buy, and that's a kick. We just reach out to them and it works. But otherwise, on a business as usual, of course, I would like to nudge a consumer to create a behavior, add certain products in the cart, so that whenever there is a sale, we are ready for that.
Was there a clever tap element here as well in terms of?
Of course, all these events or all these signals are definitely recorded at a platform level, at a clever tap level, and we basically play around all this data, but trying to make it simple.
It's all about thinking simple, and Vineet has provided a nice segue for me to ask the next question to you, Vineet, which is about this festival sales, the big festival sales. These are big ticket events for a lot of the e-commerce players, including fashion e-commerce players. So I want to know, how does Ajio tweak its outreach, its communication during these big ticket events? And because in 2020 you went all out, whether it's featuring in the IPL, signing up big stars, it was a big outreach event. So some of the lessons that you could share from how Ajio tweaks its outreach, tweaks its marketing and communication during big ticket events, and maybe some learnings from there for off season as well, if there's something which overlaps.
See, 2020 for us was not just the advent of COVID. COVID came as a shock for everybody else, to everyone in fact, and the opportunities it threw up for the online players was also in many ways an opportunity for the offline guys who had their stores shut. It also pushed us to get our technology and our other operational infrastructure faster, because we looked at it as an opportunity to scale. These big events are primarily used by us as an acquisition tool.
Okay.
But before we jump into something very big, we needed to be very clear that we do not create an event and acquire so many consumers and put out a pathetic post-purchase.
Hey, there's a big sale, come join us.
Come join us, and post-purchase, and they have a very bitter experience, could be very damning. Because what typically happens is, when you do a big ticket event, you're pushing up your daily operational KPIs, like your traffic will go 5x, 10x. You're on that single day, and usually at that 1 hour in question, it just jumps up to a number that you better have a platform that's capable of handling it. You better have enough merchandise to meet that surge in demand. You better have your logistics and operations in place to be able to deliver it, because you're suddenly looking at a graph that is going to jump for the next 5 days 10x. And you better ensure that you have a great consumer experience. So post the launch in 2017, we worked on many of these aspects, and we suddenly realized that we seem to have put together the whole infrastructure in terms of people, in terms of the platform, in terms of our partners who would work with us and provide us with the data to be able to bring in a huge surge of consumers. So these big events that first began in 2020, where we had the Big Bold sale, that was our first real big push, was used as a tool for us to get a larger set of consumers to experience Ajio. It was to give many of these consumers who aspired for brands merchandise at a deal that was something exceptional in this market. And it has worked for us substantially. And season on season, we've been able to use this.
So is it like a feeder system where you attract with these big sales? You keep them with your platform by providing great service. So when the next big sales come, there's already a cohort of users who are with you, who in turn, maybe through word of mouth or organic marketing, more users get added. So the pie just keeps increasing.
It's a step function. So you're constantly on this growth path. So you have a base of consumers who you acquire over a period of time, and then the aspect of retention becomes very, very critical. You acquire them, you ensure that you retain them. Their frequency of visits on your site is monitored very carefully. The number of pages they browse is monitored carefully. You try and deliver what he's looking for you to be able to retain this base and grow it. And these spurts that you do during these big events is to add a large set of consumers. So, for example, in the month gone by, when we had our All-Star sale, we acquired in that period almost 1 million new consumers. And the numbers sound huge, but because we are still in the growth phase, we still would have 75-80% of repeat consumers that come on our site. But for us, the KPI that we often look at is, did we attract enough number of new customers? Second is, did we retain our old customers? Did they come? Did they find what they wanted, and did they get it, and did they get it at the right time? Was it delivered as per our commitments to them? So these events are critical for us to keep growing. So when we look at total number of consumers that transacted on our site, we often look at two critical elements. Is the number of repeat too high or too low? But we always want a sensible number of new consumers that we add to our kitty.
A balance between both retention and attraction.
Absolutely.
But keeping that in mind, there's a lot of talk always of the next billion users opportunity, right? And considering Ajio has a strong hold in the tier 2 and tier 3 markets, all these talking points that you mentioned, when we look at these kind of markets, how is the brand building on its efforts to capitalize on next billion users opportunity that is coming up? Because the position is, in these tier 2 or tier 3 markets, Ajio is seen as a bargain hunter's paradise. What would you say to this?
Like I mentioned when we first spoke, what we try to do with Ajio is what a certain consumer, whether he's in tier 2, tier 3, or whether he's in a metro or a mini metro, is actually irrelevant as far as we are concerned.
Okay.
We've tried to identify consumers on their buying and their browsing behavior and create multiple segments. So what potentially you see on your app is possibly very different from what Puneet sees on his app. The kind of your homepage will be very different from his homepage. The kind of brands that you potentially like is what I throw up for you. The kind of messages that you receive. For example, if Puneet is a deal seeker, he would get a lot of messaging from me, whether it is CRM notifications or how I target him on Facebook or Google or my mass media or any of my digital campaigns, could be very clearly deal seeker kind of messaging. Whereas let's assume that you are somebody who enjoys buying very fashionable international brands. You would have a page that's designed for you.
So it's richer profiling rather than just restricting yourself to geography and the basics.
Correct,
going
to
into
begin
richer,
with. But there has been this talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And during this COVID period and post the COVID period, you saw a huge amount of migration of a lot of folks who were in tier 1 going to tier 3 and tier 4, their hometown. And then you saw the reverse migration. So we saw our numbers swing from tier 1 or metro to tier 2 to tier 3 and back. But the bottom line rests with this fact that in a country which is brand deficient, in a country that is infrastructural deficient, and with almost 400 million smartphone users, with only about 180 million odd who shop online, there's immense amount of headroom, whether it's in the metro town or the non-metro or the tier 3 or tier 4. There's plenty of headroom available.
All right, I'll take that forward and come to you, Puneet. Plenty of headroom available according to Vineet. But I also want to bring the differentiation which I mentioned between, say, metro cities and tier 2 and tier 3, because you're strong in tier 2 and tier 3. But when we look at metro cities, your competition does have a larger market share, which sometimes from a business and strategy perspective can result in different kind of moves, because you're also looking to drive up market share across all markets. So from your perspective, what are you doing to drive engagement in metros and tier 2 and tier 3 and tier 4 markets, and where do you see the the overlaps happening? Because as Vineet had mentioned, it doesn't matter where you are, you have an aspirational brand value with you as a customer. Even if you're in tier 3, you will have tier 1 buying habits. So where do you see the overlaps happening, and how are you planning to capitalize on those overlaps?
So I'll go to my older statement first, that it's irrelevant where the consumer is, right? As Vineet also mentioned, it's irrelevant where the consumer is. Our objective is definitely to of course, acquire and retain consumer at a right balance, which is good or required for the growth of business, right? So we don't really look at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 per se. So for a regular business growth, the stage where we are at, we need growth at any level, any geography. So that's why when we're talking about events, when we are talking about region-specific things like Kerala-based event, or Kashmir-based event, or Bengal-based event, right? So all those things adding value to the system, where we are reaching out to these kind of pockets and trying to reach out to these kind of consumer base, where when they come in, they will get more people along from that region. We are happy with that, right? So, and making data more simpler, using it and simplifying it with help of any analytics tool, is just to understand what your existing customers are doing, where they are coming from. Pandemic has actually changed the whole thing, whole geography, right? People were migrated, now re-migrated, and all those things. So now data itself is confused where the consumers are, right? So then we don't want to confuse ourselves. Our objective is pretty simple. We want growth. Wherever it is, we will definitely do that. Now, tier 1 metro specifically as a target, I would say it's a 60-40. So we are, of course, focusing certain marketing campaigns related to tier 1 metro audience, but still we are focusing on the growth. We are not really bifurcating all these data points to various tier levels.
All right. Let's also explore this aspect of the superpower actually of Ajio, the vertical integration aspect, because Ajio connects, I think, over 2,000 stores across cities and towns in India, and exclusively distributes some of the most popular international and national brands. Now, the X factor here is the online to offline capabilities and the sync that you have with the broader Reliance retail ecosystem, whereby, the parent counts every 1 in 8 Indians as their customer. So take us through the highlights and innovations which have come out through this sync, and more about the online to offline capabilities that are on offer, and what's next in your opinion.
Yeah, I want to also add to a point that Puneet said, and what you mentioned earlier. I don't think our competition is very far away from us, or above us, or below us in terms of metro towns.
Okay.
Because possibly our strength of our select businesses is driven by metro towns.
Okay.
So we've got a set of brands that are completely exclusive to Ajio, and that is because of the Reliance ecosystem. Now, these brands find favor in much of the metro cities, metro and mini metro. We have segmented these brands, and if one were to look at those numbers, over 70% of those brands, many of them are international brands which are exclusively available only on Ajio, drives a select bunch of very, very loyal consumers who buy from a basket of brands.
So that's your springboard, the fact that these brands are exclusively signed up with you.
Correct.
All right.
Now, we have a couple of other X factors. We possibly have the finest luxury collection right on top, which is the widest luxury merchandise that is available in this country online. We have possibly the largest set of exclusive brands, international exclusive licensed brands with us. We connect with over 3,000 brands across the country, or labels in our marketplace. And like you said, the one singular factor that, yes, added zinc to our business in a big way was our online to offline connect.
Tell us more about that.
It initially began um, as a response to the impact of lockdowns. Although online to offline was on, but when we reached out to, or many of our offline partners reached out to us with their stores shut, we had the ability to quickly connect with most of them. And like you mentioned, over 2,000 stores today are connected on Ajio. It gives us huge advantages. One is the fact that many of the online consumers get to see merchandise which usually may not be available to them from any other site, an online site. So there is exclusive merchandise that is available. Second, it is usually the latest merchandise that the retailer has put into his stores, irrespective of when the site or the online guy bought it, or whether it has been listed for a long time. Usually you would see the latest range that is made available from an offline perspective. Thirdly, it gives the consumer the assurance that I'm buying it from the store. So there's credibility of merchandise.
Old consumer habits die hard. So in a way, it's the marriage of the new with the old.
Correct. And lastly, it gives us the ability to deliver very quickly. So you could be sitting in Delhi and ordering merchandise, and suppose I had it in my warehouse in Bangalore, but I also had it in a store next to where you reside. It's cheaper for me and faster for you as a consumer. So these 4 or 5 elements was what gave us the initial flip. We've added a lot of other features along the way. We are now looking at the possibility, and we are testing it out in various locations, where you could walk into one of our stores, one of these 2,000 odd stores, and you wanted to exchange your merchandise. You could get it exchanged. You want to return your merchandise and get your instant cash refund if you paid cash for it. These are the bottlenecks that consumers find hugely convenient. That is at one level from an online perspective. From an offline perspective, if you walked into a store and you love that blue shirt, but you don't have a size 44, the retailer could turn around to you and tell you, sir, place your order, I'll have it delivered to you tomorrow. So you walk across to the kiosk, you place your order, and Ajio delivers it to you the next day. So that ensures that his conversion rates start improving dramatically. So it's a win-win for the retailer, for the online partner, and the consumer in multiple ways. And that is a reality that many consumers have understood and many retailers have appreciated.
And it's interesting to see how, in addressing all these pain points, you've truly leveraged the brand to be successful in a phygital world. You're using online and offline to the best of their ability to deliver the usual problems, the usual consumer habits which are at play, so that they're comfortable with the setup and they find the value add of, like you said, if this product is not available, the retailer does not disconnect the communication, but rather proactively says, we'll have it made available to you, just select your preference and it'll be with you. And whether you want to return, you have the assurance that there is a physical storefront that you can go to, rather than probably wait for a mail coming from someone and say, hey, maybe you might return it for after 10 or 15 days. Fantastic. So all these innovations that have come out, it brings me to the next question on how Ajio itself is structured as an organization for thinking about, say, maximizing consumer retention or multi-experience commerce, as you put it in one of the interviews. Tell us more about how the organization is structured for that.
See, from an online perspective, and one being at the cutting edge of it, you tend to get a lot of information about how things work globally, how the consumers in America are reacting, the role of social platforms, TikTok in America.
But silos always exist, right? You might get all this data. The issue is it goes, whether it's marketing, whether it's CX or other departments, there's always seen.
No, I'm talking of consumer behavior.
All right, you're talking consumer
behavior. And what many of the online players in those markets have done to address it.
Okay.
For example, social commerce. It is very big in China. It is kind of big in America. And the question is, should somebody like us jump in and say, social commerce big, we should do it? Yes, we should do it. But how we do it needs to be different. The critical aspect of adopting many of the new things that are in vogue, and it's constantly changing. It's constantly improving. Everybody is trying to figure out a better way to service the consumer, better way to knock off the pain points. So when one is looking at it from that perspective, one needs to figure out, is your consumer is a lot different or reacts very differently to a consumer, say, in America or China. For example, the biggest, should I say, boost that the online business got in India was when COD was discovered, right? When cash on delivery, it only happens in India. You don't get cash on delivery anywhere else in the world. That was because of the trust factor. Now, I don't know whether it changes dramatically, because you still need to take that packet, give him the cash. You can't open the packet, look at it and tell him, I'll give you the cash post that. But the consumer wants to know whether you will deliver a packet to me. That was important. So from an Indian consumer, based on the kind of ecosystem that we operate in, we need to pick on these changes that are happening globally and try and figure out how to make it work. So we are structured as an organization. We try to operate as clearly a startup. We think like a startup. We are pretty small in terms of numbers. People do expect us to be a very, very large organization. We are a relatively smaller organization in terms of numbers. And we like to say that we are a very matrixed organization. But matrix in the sense that most of us have multiple roles. We wear multiple hats. My role primarily is to ensure all the ducks are in one row and they're all pushing in the right direction, and everybody has a shoulder to the wheel. So that is broadly how we operate as a team, and that seems to have worked for us. We've seen a very cohesive team, and more importantly, the senior management has stuck together for a very long time. We have continuity of thought. We do believe that if we embark on any action which has been thought through, we stay the course. We wouldn't possibly buckle very early. We are a part of Reliance. We do understand how to make this business work. And more importantly, we understand fashion. So we will come out winners. So we stay the course with just about anything that we do.
Marching on together, as they say.
Absolutely.
All right. For a lot of the viewers who are watching, many of whom are startup founders, just a sense of the biggest lessons that you've learned in Ajio's growth journey, the leaps it has taken. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned? I'll come to you first and then Puneet for your views.
I think from what we've seen, from what I've seen with a lot of colleagues and friends who've set out to create new businesses, I think it's imperative that every new founder or every new head of a business stays a lot focused on execution. We're a country brimming with ideas. Execution is where we need to stay focused on. Strong sense of execution and creating value. Hype is important, but we shouldn't lose focus on these two critical elements to be able to ensure that we are able to create business that makes a lot of sense. That's at one level. The second bit, I do think it's all about putting the right team together. Every head of business or founder wants to do everything in any startup. He wants to be the guy who does the marketing, the ops, every bit of the action, because he's possibly the most invested in it. I'm talking of invested in terms of his whole being. But if he can put together the right bunch of people, he potentially will get a far greater output than him trying to do everything. So key is to find the right people.
Find the right people and onwards you go. All right. Puneet, your biggest lesson, the leaps that Ajio has taken in its growth journey, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned here?
See, of course, as Vineet mentioned, we've been there as a family for quite a long time. So every time we are learning new things, like pre-COVID, there was different learning. During COVID, was different. When we say leap, the only thing which I learned from all these phases is looking at the data in a simpler way. Rather than complexing it, if you want to achieve target as 100, making data so complex that you have to hire 20 people to read that data and reach 100, or just read that data in a simpler, better platform, better analytics with 1 or 2 people, and then just take corrective actions or whatever actions required to achieve the goal, you would reach at the same target. So that's what I learned from all these big leaps, that there is nothing which is impossible per se, right? So we have grown more than 15x in last 6-7 years, and yes, every
sky
time we
is the
have
limit.
learned that this is possible.
All right, the sky is limit, nothing is impossible. Before we let you go, Vineet, the biggest advice you'd give to startup founders watching this show, what would it be?
Right place, right time today, because I think from a country perspective, the way the economy is poised, the headrooms available in just about every sphere, especially on the online side of the business, great time. It's a good time to get into this, into an online play to begin with. And more importantly, like I said, get a great team together, give them the opportunity to be able to do what they're good at doing, rather than trying to do everything yourself.
All right, great time to enter the world of startups. But before that, always remember, get a great team who believes in you and believes in what you do, and take the brand ahead. Well, that's just a glimpse of a fantastic retention story that we have just unearthed here at Ajio. Thank you so much, Vineet and Puneet, for sharing with us the nuts and bolts of what makes for a real retention story for a brand which has grown so fast in such a short span of time and makes its users want to keep coming back for more. Wish you all the best with your future endeavors. Thank you so much. And of course, viewers, do stay tuned. We've heard the growth story of Ajio. It's time now to hear the investment story of Ajio. This is the investment story behind Ajio. We have Akhilesh Prasad with us to kind of delineate, outline how things have panned out. Akhilesh, thank you so much for joining us. All right, let's start with the fact that Ajio's growth story has been fantastic. But how would you summarize it, considering over the past 6 years, very short span of time, it's managed to contribute over 25% to Reliance's apparel business?
Funnily so, I mean, Ajio entered our scheme of things only in 2015-16 when we started looking at the online industry seriously. But before 2015-16, for Reliance as a group, we were already the largest seller of apparel in the country. We could see by the international trends that were going that online is going to be a good part of it. If you see the Indian market, hardly 20% is in the organized sector. Almost 80% or more is in the unorganized sector. Now, this unorganized sector is also supported largely by the smaller towns, the C and D class towns, the Taluka Tehsil towns, etc. Now, we saw an opportunity there, and where the dearth of availability of good produce, fashionable produce at affordable prices could be made available in the country. So we decided to try with Ajio. And as things would have it, the rest is history.
And what a journey it's been. But here at The Big Leap, we try to decode retention strengths of the brands that have made it. So I want to understand from your perspective, what's your assessment of Ajio's consumer retention strengths, and how do you see the brand evolving to match up with the expectations of an always-on customer?
So customer is very uncomplicated. I don't think the customer is very complicated. And I like all customers. They want the best of things at the cheapest price and omni availability. So we looked at setting up a business which would deliver to the customer high quality, high fashion, and at affordable prices. So price was a surprise. I think this is a formula which has worked in the globe, and it worked in India also. Most international brands make the mistake of not having a very strong Indian wear segment, especially for women. We have a very strong assortment of Indian wear also on our site. So we saw immediate traction in the market, and we were able to meet the requirements. Reliance Retail is one of the most spread out companies in this country. We currently operate in more than 2,000 towns in the city, right up to Taluka Tehsil towns. So we had a distribution network which could take this product down. So as we grew into town classes, we realized that there's a huge unmet demand. And that was the Ajio vehicle that we started to meet this unmet demand.
All right. Considering this expansion that you have seen, this unmet demand that comes in, I also want to bring in this question of monetization to you, because the digital payments revolution has sort of changed the way consumers interact with brands as well, because there are a lot of different modes: buy online, pick in store, buy now, pay later. So how do you see this impacting monetization models or evolving monetization models for Ajio?
Since we generally cater to the younger crowd, I think systems of payment is nothing new to them. They try anything which comes new. But what we do unique, and I think we are in the alpha stage of that deployment, is that today you can buy online on Ajio, and you have the ability to go to any of our designated stores and return the product. Not only can you return the product, you can get the refund in the mode that you paid. So if you paid by card, the credit goes immediately to your card account. If you paid cash, you'll get a cash refund. Which I don't think there are networks in this country which can afford to do that today. So customer wants product quick, customer wants to be comfortable that his money is safe, and customer likes that you have a physical face. Indian customers, after all, they should be comfortable that they can go and hold a collar somewhere. So to that extent, I think we provide that.
All right. You spent more than 3 decades in this business, disrupting the retail ecosystems. I want to know from you, what excites you the most about the possibilities being unlocked within the Reliance retail ecosystem with this online to offline model that you offer?
Okay, first, what excites me most is seeing an Ajio package being delivered. So in the apartment block that I live in, if I go down and I see lots of Ajio packs waiting to get delivered, nothing happier.
Brings a smile to your face.
Brings a tremendous sense of satisfaction. The question is, where does the market go from here? Is basically your question. I think, like I mentioned, India is only 20% organized. So there's no limits to growth as of now. Okay. We are looking to grow all forms of business. It's not as if we are only focusing on online. So Ajio is a prime B2C and B2B online vehicle, but we also have very confident offline devolutions right now into the market. All are seeing great traction. So growth is fantastic, and since the Reliance word is growth is life, we are asked for growth targets which would be a surprise to most.
All right. Since growth is life also comes in different stages. So as we look to the next stage of growth for Ajio, what are going to be the next investment areas? And do you see, say, international expansion in the future?
So just wanted to tell you that online business is just 4% of the entire market. So yes, I mean, inevitably, in some point of time, international markets will be considered. But what about the Indian market? 130, a population of 1.3 billion people. Aren't we underserving them with only 4% there? So I feel, first, let's exploit the Indian opportunity. And we are nowhere near finishing that journey. So the vast, over thousands of towns still unserviced. Even international players in India today are looking at C and D class towns. We are rolling into such towns physically and digitally. So we are able to offer a physical face plus a digital face in small towns. Nobody else can.
Well, all the best for the future, and the future does look promising considering the lots of untapped opportunities still prevalent in the retail ecosystem. So best of luck for that, and thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you. Future is unlimited.
Future is unlimited.
Live the dream.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Akhilesh. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you.
And with that, we come to the end of this episode of ET Brand Equity Presents The Big Leap, powered by CleverTap. I hope you enjoyed listening to these leaders and their growth stories. Thank you so much for watching this show. We'll be back again with the next episode with 2 more stories. Till then, this is your host Gautam Srinivasan signing off. Have a great day.